The broadcast crackled to life, welcoming the dedicated viewers back for another thrilling deep dive. A monumental crossroad had arrived, marking an incredibly fascinating juncture, as rumors swirled that this might serve as Caitlyn Clark's ultimate curtain call for the United States women's national basketball team during this current international window. Truth be told, peeling back the layers of her soaring career revealed a looming shadow of doubt surrounding her international future. Analysts had echoed this sentiment repeatedly. No absolute certainty existed that the generational point guard would even lace up her sneakers for the forthcoming FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup. The astonishing part was that this potential absence had absolutely zero connection to her undeniable skill or on-court brilliance. Instead, the looming dilemma boiled down to the harsh realities of scheduling conflicts, specifically the relentless grind of the Women's National Basketball Association season, and her pivotal role carrying the Indiana Fever. Should that global tournament roll around while the Indiana Fever found themselves trapped in a grueling battle for playoff survival, the narrative would fracture instantly. Picture a nail-biting scenario where the franchise clung desperately to the 6th or 7th seed, dangling merely 1 or 2 games away from postseason glory. Or worse, languishing right on the bubble in the 9th position, clawing tooth and nail for survival just to punch their ticket to the dance. Under such immense pressure, front office executives would undoubtedly demand their franchise cornerstone remain entirely devoted to the domestic campaign rather than risking fatigue overseas, a deeply logical corporate strategy. Yet, for the millions of passionate supporters watching from home, swallowing that bitter pill felt completely devastating and undeniably frustrating. The pendulum of fate could also swing in the entirely opposite direction, presenting a glorious alternate reality where the Fever dominated the league and fiercely hunted the prestigious #1 overall seed. In that triumphant reality, management would fiercely protect their prize jewel, demanding she rest her legs and maintain ultimate focus for a grueling championship run. A darker, tragic path also loomed in the shadows, a devastating wave of injuries sweeping the locker room, forcing the roster to lean on their superstar heavier than ever before. Taking a step back to survey this chaotic chessboard of potential outcomes, a startling revelation emerged. The basketball world was staring down the highly probable reality that this would be the final glimpse of Caitlyn Clark, donning the patriotic red, white, and blue for several years. Pausing to let the gravity of that statement sink in sent shockwaves through the mind. The sheer magnitude of such a prolonged absence bordered on the unbelievable. Nevertheless, pushing those future anxieties aside, the immediate battle waiting on the hardwood remained a colossal spectacle. The digital sphere had ignited with relentless mockery after the Spain women's national basketball team stumbled against the Italy women's national basketball team, with critics swiftly and foolishly branding the Spanish squad as an absolute disaster. However, peeling back the superficial scoreboard revealed a much deeper truth, proving those knee-jerk reactions lacked crucial historical context. The Spanish Armada had already secured their coveted World Cup ticket long before stepping onto the court against the Italians, transforming the match into a massive laboratory for wild rotational experiments. The coaching staff orchestrated a bizarre, frantic carousel of personnel that closely mirrored the chaotic line changes witnessed on an ice rink. Sending 5 athletes to the bench, while throwing 5 fresh faces into the fire shattered all offensive continuity, turning the beautiful game into an incredibly ugly, disjointed affair. Such radical tactics completely assassinated any sense of tempo, preventing every single competitor from finding their footing or discovering an offensive flow. It descended into pure hardwood anarchy, completely contrasting the Italian squad who marched into the arena operating on an entirely different wavelength. The desperate challengers ruthlessly exhausted their premier talent, knowing full well that victory remained the only path forward in what was effectively a sudden-death survival test. Every possession was treated like a ticking time bomb, played with the ferocious intensity of a team facing ultimate extinction. Throwing a relaxed group of scientists against a pack of cornered wolves naturally produced a bizarre final score, a phenomenon that would have similarly derailed Team USA had they mirrored Spain's casual approach against the fiery Italians. Had the Americans arrogantly shuffled their entire deck every few trips down the floor and actively sabotaged their own momentum, the dream of coasting to a dominant 30-plus point blowout would have completely evaporated. The proof lied in those specific stretches where the underdogs actually outscored the mighty Americans. The relentless European challengers showcased massive heart, refusing to bow down and keeping the battlefield highly contested for extended periods. Yet, the moment the heavy favorites flipped the mystical switch and unleashed their apex predators simultaneously, the vast canyon in pure athletic brilliance became brutally, undeniably apparent. When the powerhouse nation operated with that terrifying, laser-focused intensity and deployed their lethal combinations, absolutely no rival on the global stage stood a chance of surviving their wrath. The grim reality was starkly uncomplicated. The only formidable enemy capable of toppling the American empire was their own dangerous overconfidence. Turning the spotlight directly onto the looming Spanish clash, the tactical warfare presented an incredibly tantalizing puzzle. The defensive blueprint across the ocean severely lacked a definitive countermeasure for the perimeter maestro. Their roster simply did not feature an elite screen navigator equipped to extinguish her fiery playmaking. Should the maestro be granted the freedom to orchestrate those high-screen schemes without resistance, an absolute scoring avalanche seemed completely inevitable. History heavily dictated that whenever the prolific guard found her deadly rhythm dancing around ball screens, opposing defenses were essentially praying for a miracle. Expectations strongly suggested she would be paired against Iana Martin, setting the stage for a ruthless, targeted offensive assault. The opposition's towering enforcer, Awa Pham, certainly possessed an but carrying the tender age of just 19 years old meant that once the lethal American guard turned on the Jets, the teenager would face an absolute nightmare of an assignment. The dramatic tension would only skyrocket when the rotations introduced Megan Gustafson into the fiery cauldron. A beautiful, nostalgic cinematic sequence awaited, as those specific two-woman actions would instantly transform the international stage into a glorious, telepathic reunion of former collegiate legends. The legendary floor general possessed an absolute mastery over exploiting those exact angles, promising a breathtaking exhibition of offensive fireworks that would leave audiences completely mesmerized. Looking at their opponents, the Spanish squad shies away from brute force, favoring a gorgeous symphony of precise ball movement, pure talent, and elegant playmaking instead. Should the American defenders maintain their relentless blitz on every pick, the Europeans possess the exact offensive arsenal needed to make them suffer the consequences. A swift escape feed from a cornered ball handler, followed by a crisp entry into the paint, instantly creates a completely uncontested path to the rim. This particular guarding strategy carries inherent flaws, as the ferocious frontline pressure often outpaces the secondary defenders trying to scramble back into position. Whenever that disconnect occurs, the entire backline crumbles into utter, magnificent chaos. Flawless teamwork becomes absolutely vital in those frantic moments, yet the United States surprisingly struggles with constant, glaring mix-ups in defensive coverage. Defenders constantly arrive a second too late, or someone abandons their assignment while teammates anticipate they will guard their own territory. These chaotic sequences frequently invite completely unwarranted backlash from relentless spectators. For instance, a perfectly executed defensive shift might leave a shooter free in the corner, and when that triple splashes through the net, the helping defender unjustly takes all the heat. The truth remains that the scheme specifically surrenders that exact look, yet the internet critics absolutely erupt with misplaced fury anyway. Nevertheless, those structural cracks inevitably accumulate, which strongly suggests the European challengers will drag this contest into a nail-biting showdown that defies popular expectations. This showdown hardly promises to be a blowout, where the Americans seize a monumental early advantage and coast to an easy, undisputed victory. The Spanish contingent operates with brilliant intellect and militant focus, waiting like predators to capitalize on any American misstep. They are absolutely no weaklings, ready to surrender their pride and accept a brutal demolition on the international stage. Therefore, even though the United States rightfully holds the crown, this clash promises to morph into a fierce, intensely contested war that will shock casual viewers. Should this truly mark Caitlyn Clark's final tour of duty with the national squad for the foreseeable future, an unforgettable, epic clash serves as the perfect farewell. Such incredibly high stakes merely elevate the sheer, dramatic entertainment value of the entire magnificent spectacle. Scanning this roster reveals a terrifying number of elite talents boasting top-tier professional league pedigrees or the undeniable skill sets of absolute superstars. Buenavida certainly fits the bill. Alongside Mariano Ortiz and Cazorla, another phenomenal, youthful reserve carrying immense potential to alter the tide. Maite Cazorla already boasts top-tier American professional experience, while Aina Ayuso and Maria Araujo provide ferocious depth, with Helena Puello hovering right on the edge of that exact threshold. Maria Conde wields the sheer talent to anchor a starting lineup for the Valkyries, whereas the 19-year-old Awa Pham flashes enough brilliance to lead a developing squad or bolster a championship bench. Raquel Carrera possesses the perfect arsenal to seamlessly fortify the New York Liberty this season, just as Megan Gustafsson remains a highly reliable secondary weapon across the highest levels of the sport. Iana Martin dazzles with the undeniable promise of a future premium draft selection, perfectly complementing role players like Ginzo who diligently anchor the deepest reaches of the reserves. The most dangerous weapon in the Spanish arsenal, entirely ignored by the masses, remains their breathtaking, telepathic chemistry on the hardwood. A closer inspection of their lineup exposes a remarkably youthful foundation driving this entire, finely tuned operation. While a handful of seasoned warriors anchor the locker room, nearly every so-called elder stateswoman still resides comfortably in her 20s. Consider the 29-year-old Megan Gustafsson, whose status as a senior member perfectly illustrates the remarkably fresh-faced dynamic of the entire organization. Then there is Raquel Carrera, a towering presence who has walked the earth for a mere 24 years. Sharing an exact generational timeline with Paige Buchers, this prodigy incredibly commands the utmost respect of a battle-tested veteran within the European ranks. The days of her being a raw, emerging talent have vanished completely, replaced by a commanding, terrifyingly calm leadership presence. Another crucial cornerstone, Maria Conde, also sits at 29 years of age, providing the essential tactical guidance for the rest of the locker room. These are athletes currently operating at their absolute physical peaks. Even a stalwart like Queralt Casas, who seemingly boasts an eternity of experience, barely eclipses that identical youthful bracket. Analyzing the entire portrait reveals a truly vibrant, fresh-blooded national powerhouse preparing to shock the globe with their unyielding energy. The most mind-bending detail is the absolute disappearance of the golden generation that dominated deep into the European and global championships just 8 years prior. Every remnant of that legendary era has vanished into history, officially birthing a terrifying new dawn for the country's basketball legacy. However, the lone figure offering a masterclass in seasoned wisdom remains the brilliant, unmatched Mariana Ortiz. Serving as the elder guardian of the squad, her incredible impact extends far beyond the misleading statistics scribbled on a post-game sheet. Her brilliance lies not in stuffing the scorebook with astronomical figures, but rather in silently manipulating the rhythm and flow of the entire battlefield from the shadows. Orchestrating the attack, executing surgical reads, locking down opponents, and anchoring the emotional tide, her versatility knows absolutely no mortal bounds. A casual glance might show a modest 5 points and 5 dimes, yet her defensive mastery and flawless execution completely tilt the scales of victory. Such understated brilliance serves as the ultimate trump card in the global arena, even though this European juggernaut endured a heartbreaking collapse at last year's continental tournament. The championship crown sat agonizingly close to their fingertips before slipping away in the final moments, prompting critics to mercilessly label the catastrophe a massive failure. While that brutal verdict might hold a tiny grain of truth, the undeniable reality remains that they possessed the absolute firepower to utterly dismantle the formidable French squad. Throughout the majority of that campaign, they reigned as the undisputed queens of the hardwood, yet the ghosts of past expectations hold absolutely zero weight in this upcoming clash. The heavy burden of failure vanishes completely when both warring factions are practically guaranteed to secure their advancement to the next stage anyway. Observers could easily mistake this upcoming clash for a glittering, high-stakes showcase rather than a brutal knockout battle. Even so, whispers around the arena suggested the Spanish squad carried a much fiercer hunger heading into the showdown. Desperate to make a powerful statement against the Americans, the European challengers presented a vastly more daunting obstacle. Regardless of the sheer, overwhelming talent stacked on the American sideline. Demolishing the Italian squad by 35 points had already left spectators absolutely spellbound by the American dominance. Without a shadow of a doubt, that remarkable display stood out as the undisputed pinnacle of their current campaign. Truthfully, utterly dismantling a respectable opponent carried significantly heavier weight than the rest of their lopsided victories combined. Crushing New Zealand by 50, rolling over Puerto Rico by 40, or decimating Senegal by more than 60 barely registered on the radar. But tearing apart the Italians was a genuine revelation. Should the American juggernaut unleash that identical fury and conquer the Spanish side by 30 or 40 points, a chilling warning would echo across the entire globe. Because at this exact moment in time, the current lineup completely lacked several elite frontcourt stars, leading many experts to categorize this formidable group as merely a secondary squad or a reserve unit. Such a terrifying reality made the approaching horizon incredibly thrilling. Picture an utterly flawless, prime American lineup featuring the breathtaking brilliance of Caitlyn Clark and Paige Buchers commanding the perimeter side by side. Even if seasoned legends like Chelsea Gray retained the starting spots initially, that dynamic shift was inevitable. Unleashing both Clark and Buchers onto the hardwood simultaneously would create an absolute nightmare for any defensive scheme on the planet. The pure, unadulterated playmaking and perimeter lethality would leave opponents paralyzed, making this impending clash an absolute must-watch event for basketball enthusiasts everywhere. Rumors even swirled that this epic confrontation could ultimately crown the most valuable player of the entire event, though officials rarely ever handed out such prestigious hardware during the preliminary rounds of global qualifiers. Regardless of the hardware, the impending battle promised pure theatrical magic, leaving audiences eager to share their predictions and secure their virtual tickets for the next spectacular chapter.